The Rothschild mansion's big charity party was in full swing. 15-year-old Marcus Thompson was just being himself, enjoying the fancy food at the buffet table like everyone else. But when he reached for a snack, everything changed. Alexandra, a white teenager from a rich family, took one look at him and called security. She was sure he didn't belong there. She was wrong. What Alexandra didn't know was that Marcus's father wasn't just invited to the party. He was one of its biggest donors. Now James Thompson, a billionaire tech leader, is walking into the mansion. He's about to turn this uncomfortable moment into something much bigger, a lesson about judging people that nobody in that room will ever forget. Earlier that morning, Marcus Thompson stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting his navy blue tie. The custom-tailored suit fit perfectly, just as his father had promised it would. A gift for this special evening. "Looking sharp, son." James Thompson's voice carried warmth and pride as he stepped into the room. "Remember what I always say. Dress like you belong, act like you own it," Marcus finished, smiling at their shared mantra. James walked over and straightened his son's tie, though it didn't need straightening. "Tonight's different, Marcus. The Rothschild Foundation Gala isn't just another party. It's a statement." Marcus watched his father's reflection in the mirror. At 45, James Thompson cut an impressive figure in his own tailored suit. 20 years of building the most successful black-owned tech company in America had given him an air of quiet confidence that Marcus hoped to someday achieve. "I know, Dad. Tech Fusion's biggest donation yet." Marcus turned to face his father. $200 million to support STEM education in underserved communities. James nodded, his expression serious. "More than that. It's about showing them that change isn't just coming, it's already here." He picked up the cream-colored invitation from Marcus's desk, running his fingers over the embossed lettering. "When I started out, they wouldn't even let me through the door of places like this." What changed? Success changed some things. Money opened doors. James set the invitation down. But what really matters is what we do once we're inside those doors. Marcus understood. He'd grown up watching his father navigate these spaces, always maintaining his dignity, always pushing for progress. The lessons weren't just about business. They were about life. "I wish Mom could be here to see this," Marcus said quietly. James placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "She'd be so proud of you, Marcus. Just like I am." He paused, checking his watch. "Listen, son, I've got an emergency board meeting at 4. Shouldn't take more than an hour. I'll meet you at the gala by 7. "Dad, I can wait." "No need, you got your invitation. You belong there just as much as anyone else." James straightened his own tie. "Just remember." "I know, Dad. Head high, shoulders back, and never let them see you sweat. That's my boy." James smiled. "And Marcus, if anyone gives you trouble, handle it with grace and dignity, like you taught me." As his father left for his meeting, Marcus turned back to the mirror. The young man looking back at him was ready for this evening, ready to represent his family, his father's legacy, and most importantly, himself. He picked up the invitation, admiring how the gold lettering caught the light. The Rothschild Foundation, Annual Charity Gala, a night that would change everything, though not in any way he could have expected. The Rothschild mansion loomed against the darkening sky, its limestone facade glowing in the evening light. Marcus handed his father's Tesla to the valet, accepting the ticket with a polite nod. Other guests arrived in their luxury vehicles, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Mercedes. The air hummed with quiet conversation and distant classical music. "Name, sir?" The doorman's tone was professional but cool. "Marcus Thompson." He presented his invitation, noting how the man's eyes lingered. A moment too long, checking and double-checking the embossed card. Finally, the doorman stepped aside. "Welcome to the Rothschild Foundation Annual Charity Gala." Inside, the mansion was a symphony of old money and modern luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors. The guests, New York's elite in designer evening wear, moved through the space like practiced dancers in an elaborate social ballet. Marcus felt the looks, quick glances, subtle double takes, the slight pause in conversations as he passed. He'd seen it all before, accompanying his father to various events. But tonight was different. Tonight he was on his own. A group of teenagers around his age huddled near an ornate fireplace. Their laughter carried across the room, bright and privileged. At their center stood Alexandra Powell, though Marcus didn't know her name yet. All he knew was that she commanded attention, her red designer dress and confident posture marking her as someone who had never questioned her right to be anywhere. "I heard his company's worth billions now," one boy whispered as Marcus passed. "Yeah, but you know how these tech valuations are," another responded. "It's all virtual money." Marcus kept walking, head high, shoulders back. His father's words echoed in his mind. Their words only have the power you give them. He made his way to the buffet table, an impressive spread of gourmet hors d'oeuvres and delicacies. A server offered him champagne, then quickly corrected himself. "Apologies. Sir, sparkling cider for the younger guests. Thank you." Marcus accepted the glass, his smile never wavering. Near the windows, an older gentleman caught his eye and nodded in recognition. "You must be James Thompson's boy, spitting image of your father at your age." "Yes, sir. Marcus Thompson." He extended his hand, just as his father had taught him. "Richard Kensington. I'm on the foundation's board." The handshake was firm, respectful. "Your father's donation is going to change a lot of lives." "Where is he, by the way?" "Board meeting. He'll be here soon." "Ah, business never sleeps, does it?" Kensington chuckled. "Well, enjoy the evening, young man. You've got some big shoes to fill." Marcus nodded, feeling both pride and pressure in those words. As Kensington moved away, the whispers followed. "That's James Thompson's son. Where's his father? Should he be here alone?" The classical quartet in the corner began a new piece. Guests swayed to the music, champagne glasses clinked, and conversations flowed. But beneath the polished surface, Marcus felt the undercurrents of unease. His presence had disrupted their carefully choreographed evening. He checked his phone. 6:45 p.m. His father would arrive soon. Until then, he would do what James Thompson's son was expected to do: represent with grace, dignity, and unwavering confidence. What he didn't know was that Alexandra Powell was watching him. Her blue eyes narrowed as she whispered something to her friends, setting in motion the events that would transform this elegant evening into something none of them could have anticipated. Alexandra Powell's perfectly manicured fingers gripped her phone tightly as she scrolled through her father's banking app. She'd memorized his password months ago, and what she saw made her stomach clench. The Powell family's accounts were draining. Fast, she glanced around the glittering ballroom, making sure no one was watching. Her friends chatted nearby, all designer dresses and carefree laughter. None of them knew, none of them could know. "Did you see his suit?" Olivia Matthews whispered, nodding toward Marcus. "Has to be custom Armani." Alexandra forced a smile. Her own dress was last season's Versace, carefully altered to look new. "Probably bought yesterday. These new tech people love throwing money around." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. 6 months ago, her father had lost their family's main investment account in a failed tech venture. The same week, their housekeeper of 12 years had quietly disappeared. Let go to cut expenses. Her phone buzzed, another overdraft alert. "Lexi, are you even listening?" Olivia touched her arm. "I said, shouldn't we go say hello? My dad says Thompson Tech is the next big thing." "No!" Alexandra's response came too quickly. "I mean, let's not seem too eager. You know how new money can be." She watched Marcus speaking with Mr. Kensington. His posture was perfect, his smile confident. Everything about him radiated belonging, the very thing her family was desperately trying to maintain. Her own father was somewhere in the crowd, probably networking frantically, trying to secure investments for his failing hedge fund. Her mother had begged off with a migraine, unable to face another social event they could barely afford. God, He's heading to the buffet again, Catherine Chen remarked. Guess he's not used to fancy food. Alexandra's fingers tightened around her phone. Someone should say something. This isn't some public restaurant. What do you mean? Olivia asked. I mean, how do we even know he's supposed to be here? His father isn't around. Maybe he just walked in. The words hung in the air. Alexandra knew how they sounded, knew what she was implying. But the sight of Marcus, so confidently occupying a space her family was about to lose, made something twist inside her. Security's pretty tight, Catherine pointed out. He must have an invitation. Maybe. Alexandra straightened her dress. Or maybe some people are just really good at faking it. She thought about the credit card declines, the whispered arguments between her parents, the growing pile of bills marked urgent in her father's study. 6 months of watching their carefully constructed world crumble while pretending everything was fine. My father says these tech companies are all smoke and mirrors anyway, she continued, her voice harder than intended. Virtual money, nothing real behind it. I don't know, Lexi. Olivia scrolled through her phone. Thompson Tech's stock is up like 300% this year. My dad's trying to get in on their next funding round. Another twist in Alexandra's stomach. Her father had passed on Thompson Tech's early investment rounds, calling it too risky. Now those shares were worth millions. She watched Marcus reach for another appetizer, his movements easy and natural, like he belonged, like he'd always belonged. I'm going to talk to security, she announced suddenly. What? Why? Catherine grabbed her arm. Because someone should verify he's supposed to be here for everyone's safety. Her friends exchanged uncomfortable looks. They'd known Alexandra since kindergarten, had weathered social storms together, but this felt different. Lexi, maybe we should... It's fine. Alexandra pulled away. I'm just being responsible. That's what these events are about, right? Maintaining standards? As she walked toward the security desk, her heels clicking against marble, Alexandra pushed down the voice in her head, telling her to stop. She couldn't afford to listen to it. Not when everything else in her world was slipping away. What she didn't realize was that her desperate attempt to maintain control was about to collide with a force much bigger than social status or family pride. And the lesson coming her way would change far more than just one evening's dynamics. Time seemed to slow as Alexandra approached the security desk. Each step echoed against the marble floor, mixing with the string quartet's elegant melodies. The head of security, David Martinez, looked up from his tablet. Good evening, Miss Powell. Is everything all right? No. Alexandra kept her voice low, controlled. There's someone here who doesn't seem to belong. At the buffet table, Marcus stood examining the elaborate spread of hors d'oeuvres. A silver serving tray of delicate pastries caught his eye. That young man by the food, Alexandra gestured discreetly. He's been here alone all evening. No guardian, no adult supervision. Martinez frowned. Has he caused any disturbance? Not exactly, but... She leaned closer. How carefully are you checking invitations tonight? Across the room, Marcus reached for a pastry. The silver tray reflected the chandelier light, creating a momentary glare. I've worked security here for 15 years, Miss Powell. Our verification process is thorough. Then you won't mind double-checking. Alexandra's voice hardened. Better safe than sorry, right? Martinez sighed, studying the scene. Years of experience had taught him to read situations and people. Something about this didn't feel right. He's been nothing but polite, Martinez observed. Professional attire, proper etiquette. Anyone can buy a suit. Alexandra's fingers drummed against the security desk. Anyone can learn manners, but this is the Rothschild Foundation Gala. We have standards. The words hung in the air, their implication clear. Martinez felt his professional mask slip slightly. Miss Powell, are you suggesting... I'm suggesting you do your job. Her voice cracked slightly. Please. Meanwhile, Marcus had selected a delicate pastry, unaware of the drama unfolding. An older woman nearby smiled at him. The chocolate ones. are divine, she said warmly. Thank you, I'll try those next. Marcus returned the smile. His father's lessons in social grace automatic now. Martinez stood reluctantly. Protocol required him to investigate any security concern, no matter how questionable it seemed. He gestured to two of his team members. Alexandra watched them approach Marcus, her heart pounding. Part of her wanted to turn away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But she couldn't. Not now. Excuse me, sir. Martinez's voice carried across the suddenly quieting room. Could we see your invitation? Marcus turned, pastry halfway to his plate. The silver serving tray caught the light again, this time reflecting dozens of watching faces. Of course. His voice remained steady as he reached for his pocket. Is there a problem? Just a routine check, sir. Martinez's tone was professional, but his discomfort showed. Conversations around them had stopped. The string quartet played on. But the music felt hollow now, a thin veneer over the growing tension. Alexandra's friends watched from their corner, their expressions a mix of concern and embarrassment. Catherine whispered something to Olivia, who shook her head sharply. Here you are. Marcus produced his invitation, the cream-colored card pristine in the chandelier light. Martinez examined it carefully, aware of the growing audience. The card was genuine. He'd seen hundreds like it over the years. Everything appears to be in order, he began, but Alexandra stepped forward. Where's your father? Her voice carried more than she'd intended. The invitation says James Thompson and son. Why isn't he here? The room fell completely silent now, save for the quartet's music. Dozens of New York's elite stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. Marcus met Alexandra's gaze directly. In that moment he heard his father's voice again, handle it with grace and dignity. My father will be arriving shortly, he said calmly. He was delayed by a board meeting. Convenient. Alexandra's voice trembled slightly. And we're just supposed to take your word for that? The silver serving tray between them reflected their faces. Marcus's composed dignity, Alexandra's barely controlled fear. Two teenagers both carrying weights far heavier than pastries and parties. Just then, a new voice cut through the tension. Deep, authoritative, and somehow both gentle, and commanding at once. Actually, James Thompson said from the doorway, you can take my word for it. The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted instantly. James Thompson's presence commanded attention, his 6'2" frame impeccably dressed in a custom charcoal suit. His steps were measured, deliberate, as he made his way across the marble floor. Security Chief Martinez's radio crackled softly at his hip, backup responding to the situation. He raised his hand slightly, signaling them to stand down. Mr. Thompson. Martinez's voice carried both relief and embarrassment. Welcome to the gala. James nodded, but his eyes were fixed on his son. Marcus, everything all right? Yes, sir. Marcus's composure never wavered. Just a misunderstanding about the invitation. Alexandra stood frozen, her face draining of color as recognition set in. James Thompson, the tech billionaire whose company her father had dismissed as too risky last year. The man whose charitable foundation was about to announce a major education initiative, the donor whose contribution dwarfed her family's former influence. Miss Powell, I believe. James's tone was gentle but firm. I understand you had concerns about my son's presence here. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Alexandra felt the weight of dozens of stares. Her friends had backed away, leaving her alone in the spotlight she'd created. I was just... Her voice faltered. Following protocol? James suggested, his expression unreadable. Looking out for the Foundation's interests. Martinez shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Thompson, please accept our sincere apologies. If we had known... Known what exactly? James's question hung in the air. Known my son's father was wealthy? Known his family had influence? Is that what makes someone belong here? The string quartet had stopped playing. The only sound was the soft clink of champagne glasses and the nervous shuffling of feet. Dad, Marcus said quietly, it's okay. James placed a hand on his son's shoulder. No, Marcus, it's not okay, but it is educational. He turned to address the room at large, his voice carrying without effort. Every person in this room tonight believes in the Rothschild Foundation's mission, breaking barriers through education. That's what the invitation says, isn't it? Several people nodded, others looked away. Then perhaps this is a perfect moment for us all to learn something about barriers, about assumptions, about the work we still have to do. Alexandra's eyes burned with unshed tears. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her feet seemed rooted to the spot. Miss Powell, James's voice softened. Would you join my son and me for a conversation? I think we all might benefit from sharing our perspectives. The radio at Martinez's. Hip crackled again. He switched it off, recognizing that this situation no longer required security intervention. This was something else entirely, a moment of reckoning, of potential transformation. I'm sorry, Alexandra whispered, the words barely audible. I know, James nodded. But sorry is just the beginning. The question is, what are we going to learn from this moment? The crowd began to disperse, conversations resuming in hushed tones. The quartet picked up their instruments, filling the air with gentle music once again. But something had changed in that ornate ballroom. The facade of polite society had cracked, revealing the prejudices that lurked beneath the surface. And in that crack, a possibility for real change had emerged. Marcus straightened his tie, a gesture so like his father's, and managed a small smile. Those chocolate pastries are really good, he said to Alexandra. Maybe we could start there. It was a peace offering, delivered with the same grace and dignity his father had taught him, a chance to begin again, to do better. And in that moment, surrounded by wealth and privilege, two teenagers stood at a crossroads, one built by generations of bias and another pointing toward a different future. Smartphones appeared throughout the ballroom like fireflies at dusk. Discreet photos, quick text messages, hushed video recordings. The incident was already spreading beyond the mansion's walls. Olivia Matthews lowered her phone, her Instagram, story forgotten as she watched her best friend face the consequences of her actions. I tried to stop her, she whispered to Catherine. I knew this would end badly. Near the windows, Richard Kensington stood with a group of board members, their expressions grave. James Thompson's donation, one whispered. $200 million, another added. If he pulls out now, the weight of potential consequences hung heavy in the air. But it wasn't just about money anymore. Mrs. Eleanor Rothschild, the foundation's 80-year-old matriarch, observed from her seat of honor. Her lined face held decades of experience with both progress and resistance to it. Thomas, she called to her grandson, bring Mr. Thompson and those young people to my table. Among the catering staff, Maria Ramirez paused in her rounds, still holding a tray of champagne. 23 years serving at these events had shown her countless moments of casual cruelty masked as propriety. But this felt different. Did you see how that boy handled himself? She murmured to another server. Such dignity. Like father, like son, her colleague replied. Near the entrance, Alexandra's father, William Powell, had finally appeared, drawn by the commotion. His face paled as he took in the scene. His daughter, James Thompson, and the weight of what had transpired. Lexi? His voice cracked. What's happening? Before anyone could respond, a sharp tap of a cane drew everyone's attention. Mrs. Rothschild was rising from her seat, her small frame commanding instant respect. Mr. Thompson, she called out. A moment of your time, please. The crowd parted as James and Marcus made their way to her table, Alexandra following uncertainly behind them. William Powell stood frozen, watching his daughter walk toward what he feared might be their family's final social execution. The girl, too, Mrs. Rothschild added, gesturing to Alexandra. And her father. Phones continued to record discreetly. Tomorrow, carefully edited versions of this scene would circulate through Manhattan's elite social circles, but they would miss the subtle details, the slight tremor in Alexandra's hands, The protective way James kept his son close, the quiet dignity in Marcus's posture, the fear in William Powell's eyes, and most importantly, the determined look on Mrs. Rothschild's face, the expression of someone who had seen an opportunity for real change. "Well," Mrs. Rothschild said as they gathered around her table, "it seems we have an excellent opportunity here." Opportunity. William Powell's voice was strained. "Yes," she smiled, though her eyes remained sharp, "to demonstrate exactly why the Rothschild Foundation's mission is more important now than ever." From their corner, Olivia and Catherine watched their friend face what was coming. Other teenagers in the room moved closer, drawn to the unfolding drama, but also, perhaps, recognizing a moment of consequence in their privileged lives. Maria, the server, deliberately slowed her pace near the table, catching fragments of what would become a pivotal conversation for everyone present. Not about punishment, but understanding the systemic issues we must address. Responsibility to do better. The string quartet had begun playing again, but few were listening. The real music in the room was the sound of barriers beginning to crack, of assumptions being challenged, of change taking root in unexpected soil. And through it all, phones continued to record, ensuring that this moment would resonate far beyond the mansion's walls, a silver lining to what had begun as tarnished prejudice. Marcus reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against his wallet. Inside was a photo of his mother, taken at his 10th birthday party. Her smile had always given him strength. Mrs. Rothschild's table fell silent as everyone settled into their seats. Marcus found himself directly across from Alexandra, her face still pale with shock and shame. Her father, William Powell, kept glancing nervously at James Thompson. "First," Mrs. Rothschild began, her voice carrying decades of authority, "I want to hear from the young people themselves." Marcus felt his father's hand on his shoulder, a gentle squeeze of support. "Marcus," Mrs. Rothschild turned to him, "would you share your experience of this evening?" His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Your truth is your power, baby. Never be afraid to speak it." "Before anything else," Marcus said, his voice clear and steady, "I want everyone to understand something. I'm not angry." Alexandra's head snapped up, surprise evident in her eyes. "Not angry?" Her father's tone was disbelieving. "After the way you were treated?" Marcus pulled out his wallet, carefully removing the photo of his mother. "My mom passed away when I was 12. Cancer. But before she died, she taught me something important. She said that anger is easy, but understanding is powerful." The photo made its way around the table. His mother's smile, radiant despite her illness, touched something in each person who saw it. "When I walked into this mansion tonight," Marcus continued, "I knew what some people would think. I've dealt with it my whole life. The assumptions, the subtle looks, the questions about whether I belong." James Thompson's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting his son speak his truth. "But here's what I've learned," Marcus said, meeting Alexandra's eyes. "Those assumptions, they say more about the people making them than they do about me." Mrs. Rothschild nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "And what would you have us learn from this evening?" Marcus straightened in his chair, channeling everything his parents had taught him about dignity and purpose. "That belonging isn't about wealth or status, it's about character. My father taught me that success means nothing if you don't use it to lift others up. My mother showed me that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength." He gestured around the ornate ballroom. "This foundation exists to break down barriers, right? To create opportunities? Well, tonight we have a real opportunity, not just to talk about change, but to show what it looks like in action." The wallets resting on the table, his simple leather one, Alexandra's designer clutch, seemed to symbolize the evening's contrasts. "I don't want apologies," Marcus said firmly. "I want understanding. I want real conversation about why in 2025, a black teenager in a designer suit still has to prove he belongs in spaces like this." The silence that followed was heavy with recognition. Several phones had appeared again, recording discreetly, but Marcus didn't mind. Some messages needed to be heard beyond these walls. Mrs. Rothschild's eyes shone with something that looked like pride. "Well said, young man. Your parents, both of them, clearly raised you with extraordinary wisdom." Marcus reached for his mother's photo, but Mrs. Rothschild gently placed her hand over his. "Perhaps," she said, "we should display this tonight, along with other family photos from everyone present. Let's put faces to our stories. Make the invisible visible." The suggestion rippled through the room. Other guests began reaching for their phones and wallets, pulling out their own family photos. Marcus felt something shift in the air, a change in the current of the evening. His mother had always told him that real change happens in unexpected moments, when hearts are open and truth speaks louder than fear. He looked at Alexandra again, seeing past her designer dress to the scared teenager beneath. "Your turn," he said softly. "What's your truth?" Alexandra's hands trembled as she opened her designer clutch. Inside, behind a hidden pocket, was a crumpled bank statement she'd intercepted from the mail. The security supervisor, John Reynolds, appeared beside Martinez, his gold badge catching the chandelier light. "Mrs. Rothschild," Reynolds said, "perhaps we should handle this situation more discreetly." But Eleanor Rothschild waved him away. "The only thing we need to handle, Mr. Reynolds, is our own discomfort with honest conversation." Alexandra pulled out her own family photo. Not from their recent years, but from a decade ago, before the investment failures, before the quiet, staff layoffs, before her father started drinking at noon. "My truth," her voice cracked, "my truth is that I'm terrified." William Powell tried to interrupt. "Lexi, don't—" "No, Dad." Alexandra's voice grew stronger. Marcus shared his truth. "I need to share mine." She placed the photo on the table. A younger, happier version of the Powell family smiled up at them, her mother still radiant, her father's eyes unclouded by worry, Alexandra herself gap-toothed and innocent. "We're losing everything," she said quietly. "The house, the memberships, the social position, all of it. And I think I just wanted someone else to feel as unwelcome as I do right now." The admission hung in the air. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, recognizing their own hidden struggles in her words. "When I saw you tonight," she said to Marcus, "so confident, so belonging, it made me angry. Not because of who you are, but because of who I'm afraid I'm becoming." William Powell's face had gone ashen. "Alexandra, that's enough." "No, Mr. Powell," James Thompson spoke up. "Let her finish. This is exactly the conversation we need to have." Reynolds touched his radio, uncertain how to handle this unorthodox situation. The usual protocols didn't cover emotional revelations at charity galas. "The Foundation's mission," Mrs. Rothschild reminded them, "is to break down barriers. Sometimes those barriers are external. Sometimes they're within our own hearts." Marcus looked at the two photos on the table. His mother's. Radiant smile, Alexandra's happier past. Different stories, different pains, but both deeply human. "Your financial struggles," he said gently to Alexandra, "they don't make you less worthy of being here, just like my race doesn't make me less worthy." Alexandra wiped away a tear. "How are you being so kind to me right now?" "Because that's what my parents taught me. And because change only happens when we see each other as people, not symbols." Reynolds finally lowered his radio. The security badges that had seemed so important moments ago now felt like meaningless pieces of metal compared to the badges of humanity being shared at the table. William Powell straightened his shoulders. "James, I owe you and your son an apology. Several apologies, actually. Starting with passing on investing in Thompson Tech 3 years ago because you let assumptions cloud your judgment." James finished quietly. "Yes." Powell's admission seemed to age him years. "And now my daughter is paying for my prejudices." Mrs. Rothschild tapped her cane gently on the floor. "Then perhaps it's time to discuss how we can all do better, not just tonight, but moving forward." The room had grown still again, but this time the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was expectant. the kind of silence that comes before transformation. And through the grand windows of the Rothschild mansion, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of change. James Thompson rose from the table, his presence drawing every eye in the room. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card, simple, elegant, with just his name and Thompson Tech embossed in silver. "William," he said, placing the card on the table, "tomorrow morning come to my office, 9 a.m. Let's talk about your family's future." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew what a private meeting with James Thompson could mean. I don't understand," William Powell stammered. "You will." James turned to address the room at large. "When I started Thompson Tech 20 years ago, I couldn't get a meeting with most of the people in this room, couldn't get past their secretaries, couldn't even get them to return my calls." He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "My son knows these stories, knows how many doors were closed in my face, but he also knows what I did about it." Mrs. Rothschild leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. "Tell us, James, what did you do?" "I built my own doors." His voice carried to every corner of the ballroom. "Created my own opportunities, and I promised myself that when I succeeded, I'd hold those doors open for others." Alexandra stared at the business card, its silver lettering catching the light. "The tech world talks about disruption," James continued, "but real disruption isn't just about technology. It's about disrupting the systems that keep people apart, the prejudices that blind us to each other's humanity." He turned to Security Chief Martinez. "Your daughter, she's studying computer science at City College, right?" Martinez straightened in surprise. "Yes, sir. How did you—" "I read every scholarship application that comes across my desk. She's brilliant. Expect an email tomorrow. We have an internship with her name on it." The security chief's eyes welled with tears. "Mr. Thompson, just remember this moment," James said softly. "Remember how it feels when someone believes in your child's potential." He walked to the center of the room, his voice taking on a new authority. "The Rothschild Foundation's mission statement talks about breaking barriers. Tonight, we've seen those barriers up close, seen how they hurt not just those they're meant to keep out, but those who maintain them." William Powell wrapped an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "My $200 million donation," James continued. "It's not just about STEM education. It's about creating spaces where every young person, regardless of their race, their background, their family's bank balance, knows they belong." He gestured to Marcus and Alexandra. "These young people showed us something powerful tonight. One demonstrated grace under pressure. The other found the courage to speak her truth. Both chose understanding over anger." Mrs. Rothschild nodded approvingly. "So what do you propose, James?" "A new initiative, beyond the original donation. I want to create a youth leadership council within the foundation, led by these two." Marcus and Alexandra exchanged startled looks. "Together," James emphasized, "they'll help shape how we address both privilege and prejudice, how we turn moments of conflict into opportunities for growth." He turned back to William Powell. "And as for Thompson Tech's new East Coast Operations Division, I think we could use someone with your experience, someone who understands both the old world and the need for change." The implications of his words spread through the room like ripples in still water. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. It was about systemic change, delivered with the same strategic brilliance that had built Thompson Tech. "Mr. Thompson," Alexandra spoke up, her voice small but determined. "Why would you help us after what I did?" James smiled, and in that smile was 20 years of breaking down barriers, of proving doubters wrong, of turning obstacles into opportunities. "Because that's how change happens," he said simply. "One person, one family, one moment at a time." A crystal water glass clinked gently as Mrs. Rothschild set it down. The sound seemed to mark a transition in the evening's energy. "Before we move forward," she said, her voice carrying years of quiet authority, "I believe we need to address something directly. She turned to Alexandra. "Young lady, while Mr. Thompson's generosity is remarkable, actions must have consequences. How do you propose to make this right?" Alexandra straightened in her chair. The tears were gone now, replaced by determination. "I want to start by speaking to everyone here," she said, standing slowly. "Not just to Marcus and Mr. Thompson." James nodded encouragingly. Marcus watched with quiet interest. "What I did tonight," Alexandra's voice wavered but held strong. "It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just bad judgment. It was racism, plain and simple." A collective intake of breath swept through the room. The word hung in the air, rarely, spoken so directly in these polished halls. "Alexandra," her father warned, but she continued, "No, Dad, we need to call it what it is. All my life I've been taught to use polite words, to talk about belonging and fitting in. But what I did was judge someone based on the color of their skin. And if we can't name it, we can't change it." Marcus felt his father's hand tighten on his shoulder. This wasn't the typical apology they'd heard so many times before. "The Youth Leadership Council Mr. Thompson proposed," Alexandra continued. "I don't deserve to lead it, but I want to work with Marcus on it, not as an equal leader, but as someone learning to do better." Mrs. Rothschild's expression softened. "And how would you suggest we structure this collaboration?" "Marcus should lead," Alexandra said firmly. "He's shown more leadership tonight than I've shown in my entire life. I want to learn from him, and I want my learning to be public." She turned to the crowd, many still recording discreetly on their phones. "I want everyone to see what happens when we confront our prejudices honestly, not with excuses, not with polite evasions, but with real accountability." James Thompson stood. "And what would that accountability look like, in your view?" "Regular public reports on our progress, transparent discussions about what we're learning, using my own story as a case study in how privilege and prejudice work in our community." She faced Marcus directly now. "If you're willing to work with me, I want to document this journey. Show others that change is possible, but it requires more than just saying sorry." The room was silent, waiting for Marcus's response. He stood, matching Alexandra's stance. "My mother," he said clearly, "used to tell me that the hardest conversations are usually the most important ones." He glanced at her father. "Mr. Powell, would you agree?" William Powell nodded slowly, understanding the deeper question being asked. "Then yes," Marcus continued. "I'll work with you, Alexandra, not to punish you, but to prove something my father taught me, that the best way to break down barriers is to build bridges instead." Mrs. Rothschild lifted her crystal glass. "Then, perhaps this is the perfect moment to make it official." She gestured to a staff member who quickly began distributing glasses of sparkling cider to the younger guests and champagne to the adults. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass, "and to the courage it takes to face uncomfortable truths." As the toast echoed through the room, the string quartet began to play again, but this time the music felt less like background decoration and more like a soundtrack to real change. Alexandra's hand trembled slightly as she held her glass. "I'm scared," she whispered to Marcus. "Good," he replied quietly. "That means you understand the importance of what we're about to do." A staff member appeared with the Foundation's donor list, bound in leather and updated just that morning. Mrs. Rothschild gestured for it to be placed in the center of the table. "James," she said, opening to the last page, "perhaps it's time to share the full scope of your vision." James Thompson nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Marcus, you know that $200 million donation we announced?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "That was just the beginning." James turned to address the room. "Tomorrow morning, Thompson, Tech is announcing a 5-year, $2 billion initiative, not just for STEM education, but for complete systemic change." William Powell nearly dropped his glass. $2 billion. Phase 1 is technology access, every public school in New York getting state-of-the-art computer labs. Phase 2 is teacher training and curriculum development. Phase 3, he smiled. At Marcus, That's where our Youth Leadership Council comes in. Alexandra leaned forward. What do you mean? We're creating a network of student-led tech centers in underserved communities, places where young people can learn, create, and build their futures. And each center will have a specific focus on breaking down social barriers. Mrs. Rothschild's eyes sparkled. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Years, actually. James placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Since the first time my son came home from school, asking why some of his classmates treated him differently. The room grew quiet as James continued. But here's what most people don't know. Thompson Tech's success isn't just about innovation in technology. We've been quietly buying up significant shares in many of New York's oldest companies that have historically been resistant to change. Gasps rippled through the crowd as understanding dawned. Including, James said softly, Powell. Investment Group. William Powell's face went pale. What? That hostile takeover attempt you've been fighting? It wasn't hostile, and it wasn't a takeover. It was an opportunity I've been waiting to offer you. A chance to transform your company from the inside out. Alexandra stared at her father, then at James. You mean your family won't lose everything? Alexandra, but things will change, starting with how Powell Investment Group approaches diversity, equity, and inclusion. Marcus watched the reactions around the room. Old money families shifting uncomfortably, tech entrepreneurs nodding in approval, a new order taking shape before their eyes. The Foundation's mission to break barriers? James gestured to the donor. List. It's not just about charity, it's about fundamentally reshaping how power works in this city. Mrs. Rothschild closed the donor book with a satisfied smile. And that's why you wanted both these young people involved. One representing the future of tech innovation, the other representing traditional institutions learning to change. Exactly. James turned to the teenagers. Your partnership matters because it shows what's possible when we stop fighting change and start embracing it. Security Chief Martinez, still standing nearby, cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson, about that internship. For my daughter, she starts next month. Full pay, full benefits, and a guaranteed job offer upon graduation if she wants it. Because that's another thing we're changing. How opportunities are distributed in this city. The magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't just about one incident at a charity gala. It wasn't even just about two teenagers learning to work together. This was about systematic, strategic change, orchestrated by a man who had spent 20 years positioning himself for this moment. Alexandra looked at her father, then at Marcus. So when you said you wanted me to document this journey, Marcus nodded. It's bigger than just us. We're going to be the face of real change. Are you ready for that responsibility? James asked them both. The question hung in the air, weighted with possibility and challenge. An antique mirror on the ballroom wall reflected the gathered crowd, capturing a moment of transformation. Mrs. Rothschild rose slowly from her chair, supporting herself with her ornate cane. Before these young people answer, she said, I have a story to share. The room stilled. When Eleanor Rothschild spoke, New York's elite listened. 50 years ago, my late husband and I attended a gala much like this one. There was a young man there, brilliant and ambitious, but the wrong color for the times. Do you know what happened to him? She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. He went on to build one of the largest construction companies in America. But not here. He had to leave New York because our society, our prejudices, drove him away. That man could have transformed this city decades ago. Instead, we lost his talent, his vision, his potential contribution. James Thompson nodded slowly. We can't afford to keep making the same mistakes. No, Mrs. Rothschild agreed. We cannot. She turned to Marcus and Alexandra, which is why what happens next matters so much. Marcus stepped forward. May I share something my mother used to say? Please. Mrs. Rothschild gestured encouragingly. She told me that change isn't just about breaking down old walls. It's about building new foundations. And those foundations have to be built on truth. Alexandra wiped away a tear. What kind? Of truth? The kind we don't usually talk about at parties like this. Marcus looked around the room. The truth about how power really works. About who gets second chances and who doesn't. About why some mistakes end careers while others get brushed aside. William Powell shifted uncomfortably. Marcus is right. I've been on both sides of that equation. Given chances I didn't deserve. Denied opportunities to others who did. Then let's talk about it, Marcus said. Really talk about it. Not with corporate buzzwords or careful phrases, but with honest words about real experiences. James watched his son with pride. What do you propose? First, we document everything. The good, the bad, the uncomfortable. Alexandra's idea about public accountability. Let's take it further. Let's make this whole process transparent. Security Chief Martinez stepped forward, including the security protocols that let this happen. Especially those, Marcus nodded. Every system that reinforces bias needs to be examined. Mrs. Rothschild's eyes sparkled. And what would you change first? The assumptions, Alexandra spoke up. The ones so deep we don't even realize we're making them. Like my assumption that Marcus couldn't belong here, or my father's assumption about Thompson Tech years ago. The antique mirror continued its silent witness as the conversation deepened, reflecting faces now animated with genuine engagement rather than polite society masks. James raised his glass. To assumptions challenged. And to lessons learned, Mrs. Rothschild added. The toast rippled through the room, but this time it felt less like a social ritual and more like a commitment, a promise to do the hard work, of real change. Marcus caught Alexandra's eye in the mirror's reflection. Ready to build something new? Ready to learn, she replied. Really learn, not just perform change for the cameras. Mrs. Rothschild tapped her cane gently on the floor. Then let this be the first lesson. True transformation begins when we dare to see ourselves and each other clearly. The mirror reflected them all. The wise matriarch, the visionary leader, the young change-makers, and a room full of people beginning to understand that real power lies not in maintaining barriers, but in breaking them down. The first social media post appeared on Instagram exactly 3 minutes after James Thompson's announcement. A shaky video captioned, "Watch what happens when a billionaire dad catches racism in action. Rothschild Gala, Mada Change." Within moments, hundreds more followed. Privilege meets its match at Rothschild Foundation Gala. This is how you handle discrimination. James Thompson just turned a racist incident into a $2 billion investment in change. Watching two teenagers navigate difficult truths at just Rothschild Gala. There's hope for the future. Marcus's phone buzzed continuously in his pocket. He ignored it, focusing instead on the real conversations happening around him. The press will be all over this by morning, William Powell said, his face drawn with worry. Good, Alexandra replied, surprising her father. Let them come. This needs to be public. James Thompson checked his own phone briefly. Thompson Tech's PR team is already preparing a statement, but, he looked at Marcus and Alexandra, I think these two should have the first word. Mrs. Rothschild nodded approvingly. Yes, let the young voices lead. Alexandra pulled out her phone, hands trembling slightly. I want to post something now, but I want to do it right. Marcus moved to her side. Then let's do it together. They huddled over her phone, crafting a message that would set the tone for everything that followed. Tonight, at the Rothschild Foundation Gala, I made a terrible mistake. I let prejudice guide my actions and caused pain to someone who deserved respect. But what could have ended in anger has become an opportunity for real change. Working with Marcus Thompson to transform this moment into a movement for genuine understanding. This is just the beginning. Real change. No excuses. Before posting, Alexandra showed it to Marcus. Is this okay? Add one thing, he suggested. At the end, put, because real change happens when we face our mistakes honestly and commit to doing better. As she added his words and hit post, the room seemed to hold its breath. James watched the interaction with quiet satisfaction. Now, that's leadership. Security Chief Martinez approached with his phone. Sir, the media is already gathering outside. They're requesting statements. Mrs. Rothschild tapped her cane decisively. Let them wait. This moment belongs to the young people first. The post began gaining traction immediately. Likes, shares, and comments poured in. But more importantly, real conversations were starting in the ballroom. A board member admitting his own biases. A teenage guest sharing her experiences with discrimination. Parents discussing how to raise children differently. Look at this. Alexandra showed Marcus her screen. Their post was being shared by major social justice accounts, educational organizations, and tech industry leaders. But Marcus was watching something else, the real-time transformations happening in the room around them. The careful social masks had dropped, replaced by genuine engagement. James put a hand on his son's shoulder. You okay with all this attention? Yes, Marcus said firmly, because it's not about attention, it's about accountability. William Powell cleared his throat. The market opens in 12 hours. This will affect stock prices. It will, James agreed, but some things are more important than market value. Right, William? Powell looked at his daughter, then nodded slowly. Yes, they are. Outside, camera flashes were visible through the mansion's windows. The world was waiting for their story, but inside, something more important was happening. Real change, one conversation at a time. Dawn broke over Manhattan as the Rothschild Foundation's emergency board meeting concluded. A new policy document lay on the boardroom table, its fresh ink barely dry. Effective immediately, Mrs. Rothschild read aloud. All Foundation events will include youth representatives on their planning committees. Furthermore, a new anti-bias training program will be mandatory for all staff, board members, and regular attendees. Marcus and Alexandra sat side by side, their presence at this early morning meeting marking a dramatic shift in Foundation protocol. Both had been up all night, their phones buzzing with notifications as their story spread across the globe. The Thompson Tech Partnership, James continued, will provide funding for these initiatives, but more importantly, it will provide a framework for measuring real change. William Powell, now looking both exhausted and energized, spoke up. Powell Investment Group is committing as well. We're announcing a complete overhaul of our hiring practices and investment criteria. Alexandra watched her father with newfound respect. The man who had once avoided risky investments in minority-owned businesses was now leading the charge for change. This morning's stock market reaction has been interesting, William added, checking his phone. James smiled. Powell Group shares up 12% in pre-market trading. Sometimes doing the right thing is also good business. Mrs. Rothschild tapped the new policy document. But let's be clear, this isn't about profits. This is about progress. Security Chief Martinez, now appointed to the newly created position of Director of Community Relations, displayed a presentation on the boardroom screen. We've already received over 200 applications for the Youth Leadership Council, he reported. Young people from every borough, every background, wanting to be part of this change. Marcus leaned forward. How do we make sure this isn't just another diversity initiative that looks good on paper but doesn't create real change? By doing what you two did last night, James answered. Being honest, being uncomfortable, being real. Alexandra opened her laptop, displaying their viral posts statistics. Over 2 million shares now. But the comments I'm most interested in are the ones sharing similar experiences, the stories that never made headlines. That's your first project, Mrs. Rothschild declared, collecting those stories, creating a real record of how privilege and prejudice shape people's lives. The morning sun streamed through the boardroom windows, illuminating the policy document. Its first page bore a new subtitle, Creating Change Through Truth. There will be resistance, William warned. Not everyone in our circles will welcome this level of transparency. Good, his daughter replied. That's how we'll know it's working. Martinez's phone buzzed. Another media request for interviews, but Mrs. Rothschild waved it away. Let them wait. The real work happens here, in rooms like this, with people committed to actual change. Marcus touched the policy document gently. My mom used to say that the hardest changes look impossible until they're inevitable. Smart woman, Mrs. Rothschild smiled. And when do you think this change becomes inevitable? When enough people decide that maintaining the old barriers costs more than breaking them down. James checked his watch. Stock market opens in 30 minutes. Ready to show the world what real change looks like? Alexandra squared her shoulders. Ready to learn, ready to work, ready to build something new. The sun climbed higher over Manhattan's skyline, promising a day unlike any other in the city's history. Not because of stock prices or viral posts or media coverage, but because, in a boardroom high above the streets, the real work of change was finally beginning. Alexandra sat at her desk that evening, staring at a blank piece of monogrammed stationery. The formal apology letter she'd insisted on writing proved harder than expected. Her phone lit up with another message from Marcus. Don't overthink it. Just be honest. She picked up her pen and began to write. Dear Marcus, last night I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I belonged in the world. I was wrong about both things, and I'm starting to understand that being wrong isn't the worst thing that can happen to a person. Refusing to learn from it is. What I did to you was inexcusable, but you turned my worst moment into an opportunity for growth, not just for me, but for everyone who witnessed it. A knock at her bedroom door interrupted her writing. Her father stood there, looking different somehow, more human. Can we talk? He asked. Alexandra gestured to her desk chair. William Powell sat down heavily, holding what looked like an old photograph. I found this while going through some files, he said, handing it to her. The photo showed a much younger William Powell standing next to a black man about his age, both wearing business suits and bright smiles. That's Marcus Hampton, her father said quietly. My first business partner, brilliant investor. We were going to change Wall Street together. Alexandra looked up sharply. What happened? I chose wrong. When the older partners made it clear they wouldn't accept him as an equal, I chose my career over our friendship. His voice cracked. He went on to build one of Chicago's most successful investment firms. And I've spent 20 years pretending I made the right choice. Alexandra touched the photograph gently. Is that why you really turned down Thompson Tech's early investment rounds? Her father's silence was answer enough. She returned to her letter, adding, I'm learning that our worst choices don't define us. What we do after them does. William stood, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. James Thompson isn't just giving us a second chance. He's giving us a chance to be who we should have been all along. Alexandra nodded, continuing to write. Your father didn't just create an opportunity for change yesterday. He showed us that true leadership means lifting others up, not keeping them down. I'm grateful for the chance to learn this lesson, even though I'm ashamed of what it took to teach me. Outside her window, New York's lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably working on their first youth council initiative, not because he had to, but because he chose to turn pain into progress. She added a final paragraph. I don't expect forgiveness. What I hope for is the chance to prove that people can change when they face their truth honestly. The person I was yesterday would have been terrified of losing her place in society. The person I'm becoming understands that real belonging isn't about keeping others out. It's about bringing them in. Thank you for showing me that. Sincerely, Alexandra. She sealed the letter, knowing that these handwritten words meant more than any viral post or public statement. This was personal, real, true. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Mrs. Rothschild. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., bring your ideas for the Youth Council. And Alexandra, thank you for choosing to be brave. She touched the old photograph once more before returning it to her father. 20 years of wrong choices had led to this moment of right ones. Outside her room, she could hear her mother on the phone, actually laughing for the first time in months. The weight of pretense was lifting from their home, replaced by something lighter, truer. Alexandra took a deep breath and began working on her ideas for tomorrow's meeting. She had a lot to prove, not to others now, but to herself. 1 month later, the Rothschild Foundation's newsletter landed in inboxes across the city. The headline read, "Youth Leaders Transform Foundation's Future." Inside the Foundation's newly renovated community space, Marcus and Alexandra stood before a diverse group of 30 selected youth council members. The walls displayed photographs from that pivotal night, alongside stories of change from across the city. "Welcome to our first official meeting," Marcus began, his confidence now worn, as naturally as his suit. "Each of you is here because you shared your own story of facing barriers. Now, we're going to work together to break them down." Alexandra stepped forward. "1 month ago, I was the barrier. Today, I'm learning to be a bridge. And that's what we're offering all of you, the chance to transform challenges into opportunities." The room buzzed with energy as young voices shared experiences, ideas, and dreams. A Pakistani girl spoke about religious discrimination. A wheelchair user described accessibility issues. A trans teen explained educational obstacles. James Thompson watched from the doorway, sharing quiet observations with Mrs. Rothschild. "Look at how they listen to each other," he noted. "Really listen." Mrs. Rothschild nodded. "Because they've created a space where truth is valued more than comfort." The changes were evident beyond this room. Powell Investment Group had announced its new diversity initiatives, leading to a wave of similar commitments across the financial sector. Thompson Tech's education centers were breaking ground in underserved communities. Security Chief Martinez's daughter had started her internship, already making waves with her innovative ideas. Other corporations were following suit, opening doors that had long been closed. When my father made his choice 20 years ago, Alexandra told the group, he thought he was protecting our family's future, but he was limiting it instead. Real security doesn't come from keeping others out. It comes from bringing them in. A young council member raised his hand. "But how do we handle the pushback? Not everyone wants things to change." Marcus smiled. "By proving that change benefits everyone. Show me a company that became weaker by expanding its talent pool. Show me a community that suffered from having more voices heard." The newsletter's final page featured the Youth Council's first initiative, a citywide program pairing privileged teens with peers from different backgrounds for year-long mutual mentorship projects. "We're not just talking about change anymore," Alexandra explained. "We're creating daily opportunities for people to challenge their assumptions, to grow through discomfort, to learn from each other." Mrs. Rothschild tapped her cane gently. "And that's how real transformation happens. Not through grand gestures, but through consistent, intentional change." James checked his phone. Another company requesting guidance on implementing similar programs. The ripple effects continued to spread. "My mother would have loved this," Marcus said quietly to Alexandra as they watched their council members break into working groups. "She helped create it," Alexandra replied, "through you, through everything she taught you about dignity and grace." Outside, New York continued its bustling pace, but inside this room, the future was taking shape in the voices of young people determined to build a different kind of world. The newsletter's final words captured it perfectly. Change isn't just coming. It's already here, led by those brave enough to face hard truths and transform them into new possibilities. And in that transformed space, 30 young leaders began the real work of making history. 6 months later, a digital invitation circulated through New York's social networks. Its design was elegant but notably different, created by students from Thompson Tech's first coding academy in Harlem. "The Rothschild Foundation presents," an evening of change hosted by the Youth Leadership Council. The guest list reflected the new reality. Tech innovators beside old money families, community leaders alongside corporate executives, students from every borough of the city. Marcus adjusted his tie in the mansion's familiar entrance hall. The same mirror that had witnessed last winter's confrontation now reflected a more confident young man. "Ready?" Alexandra joined him. No longer the fearful teenager hiding behind privilege, but a committed partner in change. Almost. Marcus smiled as his father approached with Mrs. Rothschild. "The press is already calling this the most significant social shift in New York's recent history," James said. Mrs. Rothschild laughed softly. "They have no idea. This is just the beginning." The ballroom had been transformed. Instead of formal tables, casual conversation areas encouraged real dialogue. Screens displayed real-time updates from Thompson Tech's education centers. Student artwork lined the walls. William Powell, now heading Powell Investment Group's Community Engagement Division, chatted with Security Chief Martinez about their joint internship program. 40 new positions, Martinez was saying. Real opportunities, not just token gestures. The evening's program began not with formal speeches, but with stories. Students from across the city sharing their experiences of barriers broken and bridges built. 6 months ago, Marcus addressed the crowd. A moment of prejudice could have ended in anger and division. Instead, it became a catalyst for real change. Alexandra stepped forward. "We learned that transformation isn't about grand gestures. It's about daily choices, small moments of courage, consistent commitment to doing better." The stories continued. A Powell investment analyst describing how diversity had improved their market insights. A Thompson Tech mentor celebrating her students' innovations. A Rothschild Foundation board member admitting how much he'd learned from the Youth Council. James watched it all with quiet satisfaction. "Your mother would be proud," he told Marcus, "not just of you, but of what you helped create. She always said change happens person by person, story by story." Mrs. Rothschild tapped her cane for attention. "And speaking of stories, I believe we have an announcement." Marcus and Alexandra exchanged glances before addressing the room. "The Youth Council model is expanding," Marcus revealed. 10 new cities, 100 new corporate partners. "Because what happened here in New York," Alexandra added, "isn't just one city's story. It's a blueprint for change everywhere." The digital invitation had promised an evening of celebration, but what it delivered was something more. Proof that real transformation is possible when people choose to face truth with courage and commitment. Outside, Manhattan's lights sparkled like possibilities. Inside, the future was already taking shape, led by young voices determined to build a world where belonging isn't about keeping others out, but about bringing everyone in. Marcus touched his mother's photo in his wallet one last time before joining the celebration. Her smile seemed to say what he already knew. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, and somewhere in the city, another story of change was waiting to be told.